Excavating is a keyword used whenever an effect requires you to reveal cards from the top of your deck to resolve its effect. Excavate is one of the more unique keywords used in Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of just fully describing how the effect resolves, being one of Yu-Gi-Oh's very few keywords that even exist. So today we're going over some of the best cards with this keyword. Starting us off at number 10, we have the OG Excavator, Destiny Hero Diamond Dude. This is a level 4 Dark Warrior whose effect states that you excavate the top card of your deck. If it's a normal spell card, you can send it to the graveyard. Otherwise, you place it on the bottom of your deck. During your main phase next turn, you can activate the effect of that spell card in your graveyard, even if Diamond Dude is no longer on the field. Diamond Dude isn't the first Excavate style card in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. That distinction belongs to Morphing Jar number 2. But Diamond Dude is a central piece of Yu-Gi-Oh's first major strategy that entirely revolves around excavating, known as Diamond Dude Turbo. It even predates the usage of the term excavate, as its original text before problem-solving card text arrived was to look at the top card of your deck as opposed to reveal it or excavate it. The Diamond Dude is one of the excavators who does work by milling the cards you want, but doesn't always mill to avoid dumping powerful monsters into the graveyard, something Konami was wary about even as early as 2007 thanks to cards like Graceful Charity and Painful Choice showing how powerful dumping big monsters could be. But the restriction to only putting spells in the graveyard didn't stop Diamond Dude. Back in 2007, powerful spells were still the name of the game in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Diamond Dude Turbo was a deck that sought to cram as many powerful spells and activate as many of them as possible throughout the game. In decks that were often up to 30 spell cards, Diamond Dude was frequently plussing you every time you summoned it by excavating incredible cards like Dimension Fusion or Lightning Vortex for free. What made Diamond Dude even more special was that you never had to pay the cost for these cards you were activating off of its effect. So cards like Destiny Draw, normally a net neutral card you'd want in a deck with heroes in it, suddenly turns into a pot of greed when hit by Diamond Dude's effect. The turbo part comes from just how readily the deck got to Diamond Dude. He was far easier to get to than just 3 copies you would run in the main deck, as these strategies would stack up searches like Reinforcements of the Army or E-Emergency Call to find him. Speaking of finding him, Diamond Dude wasn't the only card excavating in the deck, as Reason and Monster Gate were both using the deck to not only special summon Diamond Dude himself, but also to cheat out game-winning boss monsters like Jinzo or Dark Magician of Chaos. And all these searchers and special summon effects were normal spells that Diamond Dude could take advantage of to plus you on the next turn if its effects hit them. When the name of the game is resource management and card advantage like it was in the earliest days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Diamond Dude really shined as a one-card advantage engine. While Diamond Dude's fortune waned as more and more powerful monsters were released, especially in the Synchro era, Diamond Dude Turbo was an all-time great deck of its era, and one of the first decks to truly compete by using Excavation. And today's video is brought to you by HelloFresh. HelloFresh has 40 weekly recipes to choose from for all meal occasions, lifestyles, and preferences. When I'm in the mood to cook, HelloFresh's meal kits make it super easy for me to prepare my meals without much planning. There's also no worries if you're not a pro in the kitchen. HelloFresh's foolproof recipes arrive pre-portioned and easy to prepare in just a few steps. One of the meals I chose this week was the sheet pan Italian pork meatloaf with balsamic zucchini melody, herbed ricotta, and pesto garlic bread. One of the things I like most about HelloFresh are their substitution options for this meal, where I actually sub the pork for ground beef. HelloFresh makes it so easy to cook their meals because they equip you with a super thorough step-by-step card that outlines how to prepare the meals and even gives you breakdowns of how to scale for a 2-person portion versus a 4-person portion. For me, that means I can dictate how much I make and gives me opportunity to make leftovers too. HelloFresh makes it so easy to cook that I'm able to knock this entire meal out in half an hour. If you're curious about HelloFresh and want to experience the ease of home-cooked meals just like this one, then use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use code POGTDLJuly50 for 50% off plus free shipping. Once you click, my description will live update to count the purchases. Hit me up on Twitter once you give it a try and let me know what you think. Next up at number 9, we have Salamangreat Foxy. This level 3 Fire Cybers monster has the effect when it's normal summon to excavate the top 3 cards of your deck and add 1 Salamangreat card in those excavated cards from your hand before shuffling rest back into your deck. Also, if Foxy is in your graveyard and there's a face-up spell trap card in the field, you can discard a Salamangreat card, special summon Foxy, and destroy a face-up spell trap card. Foxy is limited to only using one of these effects per turn. Salamangreat Foxy, as you might have figured out, is part of the Salamangreat archetype, a link-based deck that revolves around low-to-the-ground monsters with solid effects and tons of recursion and card advantage generation. Foxy is integral to this strategy. It's one of the Salamangreats that recurs itself from the graveyard, making it one of the better targets to either dump to the graveyard with an effect like Salamangreat Gazelle, or in general is just one of the better ones to get into rotation to link off of and get some graveyard value out of your link summon. Obviously, this relies on a face-up spell card to destroy being around, but Foxy also serving as a great answer to floodgates like Skill Drain or problematic field spells like Pressured Planet Rate Swath is to make up for how conditional the effect is. The other obvious card advantage part of Foxy is its Excavation effect on normal summon. Being able to dig 3 cards deep and add any archetype card to your hand is a pretty solid effect. While it's not a guaranteed +1 like some cards on normal summon, this combination of effects has created a very common line of play called Foxy Control for Salamangreat decks, where they constantly recur Foxy over and over, eliminating back row, creating link material, and adding cards in hand to fill its graveyard effect with its Excavate effect. Foxy provides a sort of resource-generating inevitability in Salamangreat, which capitalizes on Salamangreat's recursion and disruption effects like Salamangreat Roar and Salamangreat Rage to slow the game down. In slower game states, a card like Foxy really lets you run away with it, and it's hard to beat Salamangreat in a resource war with this fiery fox running around. Salamangreat itself has been a great deck for years, even seen played to this day, in no small part thanks to Salamangreat Foxy. And at number 8 on this list, we have Absolute King Backjack. This is a level 1 Dark Fiend monster with 2 effects. Backjack's first effect lets you, during your opponent's turn, banish Backjack from your graveyard to activate the top card of your deck. Then, if it's a normal trap card, you can set that card to the field, but otherwise it's sent to the graveyard. And that card set by this effect can be activated the same turn you set it. Backjack's second effect triggers when it's sent to the graveyard, allowing you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, then place them in any order back on top. Absolute King Backjack is one of the most useful monsters ever printed for heavily trap-based strategies. Its ability to dig you into one more trap card to activate on your opponent's turn after setting up a guaranteed hit with its deck stacking ability is invaluable. It lets trap players play around some back row removal thanks to the quick effect nature of Backjack's Excavating and setting ability, and it just plainly lets you dig 3 cards deeper for whichever back row disruption you're interested in. Backjack first saw competitive play in the earlier, heavily trap-based variants of Burning Abyss decks. Burning Abyss already used cards like Mathematician to search and set up their Burning Abyss graveyard effects, and the ability to get Backjack into rotation to dig to powerful trap cards like Fire Leg of the Burning Abyss or Mind Crush gave Backjack a powerful place as a searchable one-of in these variants. Backjack being a graveyard synergy also helped it find a home in 60-card Paleozoic Frog decks. Considering the backbone of the deck was the normal trap card Paleozoics, and the 60-card variants played that Grass Legs Greener to mill for graveyard value, Backjack found a perfect home as a mill that could get you into another Paleozoic of your choice off of the top of your deck. It even made a great Foolish Burial target in those decks. Despite being the height of Tier 0 Zodiac format, 60-card Paleofrog is one of the only decks of the era to give Zodiac a run for its money, in no small part because of how much value milling a Backjack gives you, as Zodiac could often struggle against trap-heavy decks due to Zodiac Trident only destroying face-up cards. Even more modern decks like Labyrinth often include Backjack thanks to its inherent synergy as a trap searcher and for its typing as a fiend, letting it synergize with cards like Arcfiend's Ghastly Glitch or Labyrinth in a pitch. Deck stacking, excavating to go +1, and quick effect speed make Backjack an incredible piece of trap support and a great excavator. And at number 7 on this list, we have Monster Gate. This card states that you tribute a monster and then excavate cards to the top of your deck until you reveal a monster that can be normal summoned or set. You special summon that monster and then put the rest of the excavated cards into the graveyard. Monster Gate is one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most potentially busted spells. It's the first card on this list that uses the excavate mechanic as a way to not only special summon a monster from deck, but also gives you a chance of filling your entire graveyard up with cards along the way due to milling everything it reveals before it summons. As you might know from cards like that Grass Legs Greener, cards with high mill potential can create an absolutely broken amount of advantage. And while most of the time, mass milling strategies usually want to mill a bunch of monsters that Monster Gate would special summon instead, that still doesn't stop Monster Gate from being an amazing card. The card saw immediate play early in Yu-Gi-Oh! The Magical Scientist First Turn Kill, or FTK decks, which would play a small number of creatures as well as tons of spell enablers to quickly set up a Magical Scientist and a Cannibal Turtle, the combo of which would burn your opponent to death on the first turn. A card like Monster Gate was enabled by tributing off of a free special summon in Gillosaurus to dig for your combo pieces, or even a card that could extend you further like Dark Magician of Chaos. As before its errata, it could just return a Monster Gate to your hand and you can keep gambling again on one of your combo pieces. This deck also took advantage of the fact that Monster Gate would mill a ton of spell cards that the deck played for draw power or recursion, and then use a monster like Dark Magician of Chaos or a spell like Spell Reproduction to dig up the cards you needed, like perhaps a Last Will, that can guarantee you getting one of your FTK pieces. That's not even the only FTK that played Monster Gate, as Magical Explosion decks basically functioned the same way, dumping a bunch of spells into the graveyard for free and set up instantly lethal magical explosions. It wasn't just FTKs though, as Monster Gate even saw play in the previously mentioned Diamond Dude Turbo, as it was part of the Turbo side of the deck that both sought to dig towards summoning a Diamond Dude, as well as get a lot of value for not needing to pay the cost to get the effect off when hit with Diamond Dude's effect. Monster Gate's playability extended past the DM era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Too. The other decks Monster Gate saw a lot of play in were Lightsworn and Infernoid decks. Lightsworns just really liked the card for its ability to mill copies of Wolf Lightsworn Beasts, as well as filter into new Lightsworns to trigger more milling effects. But Infernoids might have been the deck that loved Monster Gate the most. Infernoids are a fairly unique archetype, with the vast majority of its main deck monsters being incapable of being normal summoned. They summon themselves from the hand or graveyard by banishing other Infernoids from the hand or graveyard. Putting 2 and 2 together, Infernoids needed a lot of other Infernoids in the graveyard to really get going, and Monster Gate couldn't summon the ones that you wanted to mill. This led to a resolved Monster Gate frequently milling several different Infernoid names. The fact that a single Monster Gate resolving could set up multiple Infernoids in the graveyard was incredible, as Infernoids had some incredibly powerful effects that were intended to be locked behind a difficult summoning requirement. As an example, Infernoid on Nunca had a combination Spell Trap Negate and Dark Hole style board wipe for every monster in the field besides itself was powerful enough. But the cherry on top was the Monster Gate would usually summon an Infernoid Decatron, an Infernoid that could be normal summon and thus special summon off of Monster Gate. Decatron was able to gain the effects of any other Infernoid by sending them from the deck to the graveyard, doubling up on your most powerful effects. It was a match made in heaven, as a resolved Monster Gate and Infernoid often had an even better outcome than a resolved That Grass Looks Greener thanks to it actually summoning Decatron. Monster Gate is a pretty bonkers card in the deck it works with and definitely one of Yu-Gi-Oh's best excavators. And at number 6 in our list we have Purrely. This is a level 1 light fairy monster who, when normal or special summon, allows you to excavate the top 3 cards of your deck and add 1 Purrely spell or trap card to your hand, before placing the rest of the cards on the bottom of your deck. Also, once per turn during your main phase, Purrely lets you reveal 1 Purrely quick play spell from your hand and special summon 1 Xyz monster from your extra deck that mentions that card's name, with Purrely itself using material for the Xyz monster, and also attaching the revealed quick play spell to the summon Xyz monster. Purrely is a namesake of the Purrely archetype and one of the deck's most important starters. Purrely largely revolves around stacking up a single Xyz monster with tons of material to enable the powerful effects of their X-Deck boss monsters, like X-Purrely Happiness or X-Purrely Noir, whose more powerful effects require 5 or more materials to be online. It often does this by cheating the usual Xyz summoning mechanic with Purrely's own effect. The deck also has a series of quick play spells and level 2 Xyz monsters that set up these plays, like how Impurely Plump can attach 2 spell or trap cards from your graveyard to itself as a material, and do it as a quick effect if it has a specific quick play as its material, in this case Purrely Delicious Memory. This leads to a gameplay setup of playing out of a lot of your Purrely quick play spells to fill up your graveyard for material, but this often comes with exhausting the hand. That's where Purrely comes in, as its ability to both plus you very frequently off of its Excavate effect and set up an easy Xyz summoning based on what you revealed really helps mitigate the inherent minuses of the Purrely engine. Purrely is an incredibly new archetype as of this recording, being one of the top decks in the current metagame. It's so new that it hasn't had many opportunities to make an impact on the metagame with its full support, but it has been a very successful deck over the OCG where it's been at full power for a little while. Still, it's one of the top decks of the current metagame and even got Konami to give it an incredibly early hit on the limited list with the limitation of Purrely Delicious Memory, the consensus best quick play spell of the deck. Purrely itself is one of the central pieces of the entire deck and an excellent use of the Excavation mechanic as an advantage engine. And at number 5, we have Reasoning. This spell makes your opponent choose a monster from levels 1 to 12. Then you excavate the top card of your deck until you reveal a monster that can be normal summoned or set. If your opponent guesses correctly and the monster's level matches their guess, that monster goes to the graveyard along with all the other excavated cards. If they guessed wrong, you get to special summon it instead of milling it with the rest. Reasoning is a very similar card to the previously mentioned Monster Gate, and was played in many of the same decks. Magical Scientist, Diamond Dude Turbo, Infernoids, and Magical Explosion are all decks we talked about with Monster Gate that also frequently played Reasoning for the same reasons. Milling a bunch of cards and getting a free special summon at the end of it is a powerful effect ripe for abuse. There's a couple of distinct differences though. For one, Reasoning does give your opponent a chance to rob you of the special summon, which doesn't happen with Monster Gate. If you're in a well-defined metagame and people know which decks are playing Reasoning, it's not uncommon for an educated guess to thwart Reasoning. That said, Reasoning also does not require you to tribute a monster for its effect, making it potentially completely free of a special summon on top of a milling machine. So, how do these differences change things? Well, the lack of a cost made Reasoning significantly more splashable in basically any deck, as long as the deck wasn't susceptible to having its monsters' levels easily called. This made Reasoning usable in decks like Six Samurai, which was one of the few decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's early history that played a lot of various levels. It would run low-level, normal summonable monsters like the 6 Irao, but the deck also ran high-level pieces like Grandmaster of the Six Samurai as a level 5, Enishi, Shen's Chancellor as level 6, and Great Shogun Shien as level 7. This huge level range meant that, even if you knew you were up against Six Samurai, every single level you might name had a very low chance of being the right one off of a Reasoning. And the statistically most likely number to hit, 4, wasn't that great of a call because the real punishing cards as special summon for free were the high-level Six Samurais. Even though Six Samurai didn't take advantage of the milling property outside of the stable revival spells like Premature Burial, A free special summon from the deck upwards of 80% of the time was good enough for Reasoning to be great in the deck. This interaction was taken to its absolute extreme in maybe the best Reasoning deck ever that wasn't FTK, Cosmo. Cosmo is similar to Six Samurai in that they have various playable monsters at different levels. But instead of ranging from levels 3 to 7, Cosmo ran the levels from the humble 1, Cosmo Tin Can, all the way up to the monstrous level 9, Cosmo Dark Eclipser. And while Six Samurai usually hoped to hit one of the more powerful high-level monsters, even though low-level Cosmo monsters like Tin Can and Farm Girl were instrumental combo starters that would put you way ahead if you got to special summon them for free. Reasoning is one of the most unique and oddly powerful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, forcing your opponent to gamble and test their format knowledge, or suffer you getting one of the most powerful effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! To special summon from your deck and fill your graveyard while you're at it. Following it up at number 4 on this list, we have Pot of Duality. This card states that you excavate the top 3 cards of your deck, then choose one of those cards and add it to your hand, and shuffle the rest back into the deck. The downside is that this effect is once per turn, and on the turn you play Pot of Duality, you aren't allowed to special summon monsters. Pot of Duality is one of the many Pot of Greed retrain cards and is one of the best ones historically. The ability to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and pick the best one to add to your hand is immensely powerful. After all, a card like Upstart Goblin is limited for just drawing one random card, with the minor downside of giving your opponent 1,000 life points. Duality's ability to dig for your most important card 3 cards deeper is significantly better, though it did come with a hard once per turn, unlike Upstart Goblin. More importantly as the downside was the special summon limitation. This has limited Duality's usage in the higher speed, higher special summon environments of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! When it first came out, basically every deck was playing Duality at 3 copies. In a slightly slower format where you have a few turns to play and can survive off a generic background interaction, even decks that rely heavily on special summoning for their main strategy were maxed out in Pot of Duality, as both a consistency piece to enable their combos next turn, as well as to create the best back row going first or to dig for powerful answers going second. One of the first decks to use Duality without relying on much special summoning was a pseudo-stun Gemini beatdown deck revolving around powerful normal summons like Thunder King Ryo and Doom Caliber Knight, as well as combining the Gemini monsters Emerald Hero Neos Alias and powerful support cards like Gemini Spark and Hero Blast. But even special summon strategies like Dandelion and Quick Draw Synchro decks were playing this card on release. This incredibly high play rate went on for several years in basically every playable deck because of just how generically good it is. Even with the power curve of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And accelerating the pace of play and making special summoning more and more dominant as a strategy, tons of modern decks still use Duality. A deck like Floowandereeze obviously never special summons outside of extreme cases, and thrives on the consistency a card like Duality adds. Slower control decks that might still special summon, but don't need to do it on their turn like Labyrinth or Denomorphia thanks to relying on trap cards, are still competitive modern decks that play Pot of Duality. You could even fill an entire hour-long video just listing all the different decks and variants throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history that have all played Pot of Duality. Turns out, excavating 3 cards and picking one is incredibly strong. And on that note, following it up at number 3, we have Pot of Prosperity. This spell card states that you can banish 3 or 6 cards of your choice from your extra deck, and then excavate that many cards from your deck. Choose one of those cards and add it to your hand, and place the rest of them on the bottom of your deck in any order you choose. For the rest of the turn, your opponent takes half damage from any source, and you cannot draw cards with card effects this turn. Pot of Prosperity is another in the very expansive list of Pot of Greed retrains, though Pot of Prosperity is less a lower power retrain of Pot of Greed and more of a combination of 2 other Pot of Greed retrains, the aforementioned Pot of Duality and Pot of Extravagance, as you can see in Prosperity's artwork. Like Duality, it lets you excavate cards and pick one to add to your hand, but instead of being saddled with a special summon restriction that makes it unplayable in the majority of modern decks, it instead takes some inspiration from Pot of Extravagance. Both Extravagance and Prosperity require you to banish 3 or 6 cards from your extra deck and earn you a better effect for accumulating more, and both cards have the downside of preventing you from drawing off of card effects for the rest of the turn. The biggest difference is Extravagance is a hard +1, and the banishes are random. This is a pretty big trade-off, as going up in card advantage is incredible, but most decks don't want to take the risk of banishing all of their critical extra deck pieces by happenstance. Prosperity fixes this by letting you choose what is banished, but lowering overall power level by going even on card advantage. That said, the best card in your top 6 is arguably just as good or better than getting a random 2 card off the top of your deck. It really comes down to deck building concerns and what you're looking to accomplish. Previously mentioned, decks like Labyrinth are happy to play either, as the random banishes don't matter and it comes down to preference. But the vast majority of modern, high-powered decks that can afford to banish utility extra deck cards love Pot of Prosperity. Currently, dominant decks like Kashtira, for instance, have plenty of extra deck space, and don't really draw any cards throughout their combo. So the downsides of Prosperity are pretty negligible, while the Excavating and add effects add arguably the best consistency boost of any draw card ever printed. Among all the Pot of Greed families still legal, only Pot of Desires sees more play than Prosperity due to having an even less restrictive, if more luck-based drawback. Prosperity is the best excavation spell ever, and will undoubtedly see play for years to come. And at number 2 on this list, we have the Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon. This is a level 8 Dark Dragon Synchro monster with 3000 attack that requires 1 tuner and 1 more non-tuners in order to make. When you Synchro Summon Chaos Ruler, you excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, choose 1 light or dark monster from those cards to add to your hand, then mill the rest to the graveyard. Also, if Chaos Ruler is in the graveyard, you can banish a light and dark monster from your hand or graveyard to special summon it, though Chaos Ruler banishes itself when it leaves the field afterwards. Chaos Ruler is one of the most powerful combo extenders in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! It fits a similar niche to Reasoning and Monster Gate, where its Excavation effect can get you a new card in rotation, but is also there primarily for milling cards in the graveyard to plus that way. The thing that sets Chaos Ruler apart for those is that it doesn't really have any particular restriction or luck involved in getting some guaranteed mills, on top of being easily accessible from the extra deck instead of having to be drawn randomly. So long as your deck could Synchro Summon, it could literally make Chaos Ruler, as generic level 8s tend to be the easiest ones to make. Chaos Ruler is incredible as an extra deck monster for almost always plussing you on summon, as while you technically lose 2 monsters to Synchro Summon it, you gain Chaos Ruler, the card you'll likely add off of its effect, all the value out of your graveyard, and Chaos Ruler's special summon from the graveyard to make Chaos Ruler a +1 or more. But really, any deck that can make Chaos Ruler and get anything out of filling the graveyard was likely to play it. It first saw play in the monstrous Dark Pile decks that combined Orcus, Dangers, and Phantom Knights, but it was Dragon Link that really took advantage of Chaos Ruler the most. Not only was Dragon Link notorious for having an absurd number of graveyard effects that capitalize on Chaos Ruler's milling, a core of the monsters that were primarily light and dark to fulfill its second summoning, but it even ran the perfect end board piece to capitalize on Chaos Ruler's typing with Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss. This phenomenally powerful boss monster was historically hard to make without cheating it out off of cards like Guard Dragon Agripane, as it required a tuner and a non-tuner Dark Dragon Synchro monster as its materials, which while not impossible, was very costly to set up. Chaos Ruler's enhanced synergy with Dragon Link meant that the path towards making Hot Red wasn't just easy, it was downright profitable. After that, basically every Synchro deck that didn't lock itself out of summoning it was running Chaos Ruler. It found homes in all sorts of pile decks like Adventure, Eldritch, and most notably, Punk decks lists that could mass spam Synchro summons and greatly appreciate milling effects. Adventure loved to get its Water Enchanters of the Temple milled to the graveyard, Eldritch would plus off its trap cards being milled, and Punk's entire engine seemed to design to be played out of the graveyard. But then came Tearlaments, the greatest mill deck in history, which would splash a small Punk engine to access Chaos Ruler. Milling 4 cards and adding a Tearlament starter like Tearlament Shire to hand was beyond game-breakingly powerful. This would spell the end for Chaos Ruler, finally earning itself a well-deserved spot on the ban list for its absurd synergy with Tear, but also for years of downright busted playmaking. Chaos Ruler is arguably the single greatest card to ever have the word Excavate printed on it, and only something truly degenerate could rival it. And speaking of which, finally, with the number 1 spot on this list, we have all the Adamancipators. That includes Adamancipator Researcher, Seeker, and Analyzer, and even their extra deck monsters. I'm putting them here together because each main deck Adamancipator, while great on their own merits, could take a place on this list. But as a collective, they all share the exact same Excavation effect, paired with different stats and different conditions to special summon themselves, so they're being ranked together. The important thing for this list is that they each have the effect that you excavate the top 5 cards of your deck. Special summon 1 level 4 or lower non-tuner rock monster from those revealed cards, then put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. The Adamancipators are a series of rock monsters that rely on special summoning the regular Adamancipators and then comboing off to insane levels with these special summons. The designed intent is for the tuner Adamancipators Archaeologist, Seeker, Researcher, and Analyzer is to summon the different attribute Adamancipator crystals, and then sync up into their adjoining Adamancipator extra deck monsters like Dragite, Leonite, and Raptite. And while this certainly happened plenty, as Raptite was a great extender and Dragite itself is a great end board and board clearing piece with their Excavation effects, it went much further than that, since the Adamancipators were not strictly locked into only excavating for the crystals. Suddenly, over 15 years of largely unplayable rock monsters suddenly found a home in an incredibly explosive combo deck that could take advantage of them. Cards like Doki Doki suddenly became incredibly powerful hits off of an Excavation effect that lets you continue your special summons and build your board. Koiki Mirror Guardian went from a fringe card played in older formats and rogue level decks to one of the most oppressive normal summons in the game, enabling you to special summon your Adamancipator Researcher while backing up your combo with a monster negate to stop pesky hand traps. Gigantus went from a bygone beat stick that hadn't seen much play since the DM era to a hyper-effective rank 4 enabler in this deck. The list goes on, but most notoriously, Adamancipator was the deck that broke Block Dragon. While Block Dragon was playable in some other disparate rock strategies like Megalith or the odd Burning Abyss deck, the second the card slotted in Adamancipator, it was an immediate problem. Adamancipator had the ability to constantly summon and resummon Block Dragon thanks to their ability to mass special summon, and how tons of the rock support they would run was almost always Earth monsters. If a highly repeatable special summon wasn't good enough, Black Dragon's absolutely broken effect to add up to 3 rock monsters whose levels add up to 8 seemed almost tailor-made to work with the main deck Adamancipators. As when you first link or synchro off your Black Dragon, its ability to grab Seeker, Researcher, and any other level 4 meant it became both a source of all the link and synchro materials you need, an incredible extender that got your combo going as soon as you summoned it, or an instant follow-up on any future turn as you can completely restock on Adamancipator names to combo off all over again. It should come as no surprise that the power level of Adamancipator got Black Dragon banned. Adamancipators are the ultimate excavation deck, both from its mechanic standpoint and even thematically, as they're a bunch of archaeologists excavating rocks and crystals. If it weren't for a pandemic lost couple of years of Yu-Gi-Oh, it might have left an even bigger mark historically in the tournament scene. Adamancipator at the height of its power is one of the greatest combo decks of all time, and by far the strongest user of the Excavate mechanic. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other excavators that you should have dug up for this list? Or are there any other topics you'd like me to cover? If so, leave those suggestions down in the comments below.